Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Aquarium Radio at aquariumradio.com. And I'm your host, Jenna Care Lesson. And for a few minutes here, we have my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. I want to say aloha to our listeners. Okay, he'll be with us in just a moment. And today we have an episode of Extraterrestrial Contact with our guests, Trish and Rob MacGregor. And there they are. They called into the show. Excellent. So let me tell you a little bit about them. Rob and Trish MacGregor have been professional writers of both nonfiction and fiction since 1984. They've written extensively on the pursuit of inner paths. Their nonfiction books on synchronicity, dreams, the tarot, yoga, astrology, divination, and animal symbolism reflect such inner journeys. Their most recent nonfiction books are Aliens in the Backyard, UFOs, Abductions, and Synchronicity, and the Synchronicity Highway, exploring coincidence, the paranormal, and alien contact. Between 2003 and 2013, the MacGregors wrote the Sydney Omarr astrology books published by a New American Library. Trish, as T.J. MacGregor, is the author of 37 novels, and in 2003 won the coveted Edgar Allan Poe Award for her novel is Apparition, the third book in the Hungry Ghost trilogy. Rob is the author of 19 novels, including the New York Times bestseller Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and 6 other Indiana Jones novels. Let me make sure that, 1 second here. Yep, it's on speaker. Okay, I'm going to make sure you're hearing me. He also won the Edgar Allan Poe Award for Prophecy Rock, a YA mystery or YA mystery, and its sequel Hawk Moon, and was an Edgar finalist. And let me click over here and see if this is our guest, Trish and Rob MacGregor. Are you there?
We are here.
We're here.
Excellent. It's wonderful to have you on the show today.
Thank you for inviting us.
We're having thank you so much for coming. Just to give our listeners a heads up, we're having a very interesting day in the jungle here. We had a horrible windstorm, so trees are down everywhere. We didn't have electricity. Didn't know if the show was going to come off today, but here we are. And I'm going to get my headphones on so I can actually hear you a little bit better. What would you like to tell our listeners about yourselves? My goodness, you're like a super couple with your writing and your talent. So, go ahead, tell our listeners a little bit more about yourselves.
Yeah, one thing people might be interested in, since we're talking about our work on UFOs and alien contact, is that back in the mid-'80s, we were writing a lot of magazine articles at that time, just starting our career as freelance writers, and we got hooked up with Omni magazine, which was an interesting science magazine because the inside of the magazine, the central pages were red, and they were called antimatter, and they included articles about paranormal phenomena and UFOs, mysticism, and we started getting regular assignments from the editor for that section. So we got involved in some very interesting experiences during that time, interviewing Bud Hopkins and Betty Hill, and going to UFO conferences, and so that was sort of how we got started with our interest in UFOs.
Wow. Well, that's fascinating. I've been interested in UFOs all my life, and not everybody has. So this started with Omni Magazine.
Yeah, professionally it did.
Professionally, we've always had an interest. Yeah, we've always had an interest in the subject, and we've always also wanted to write a book about UFOs, but we never knew how to do it because there's just so many books out there, and it just seemed like, well, if we tried writing one, it would just be repeating what others have already done. So finally, we found a unique story, and it turned into Aliens in the Backyard, and it dealt with connecting the phenomena of synchronicity with UFOs and aliens, and that's how we worked our way into the field.
Well, that's fascinating. Peter Moon also explored synchronicity, and he said that when you get to synchronicity that's so massive and extensive, it's beyond random probability, and so you're in some kind of zone that's, from my understanding, it's kind of like outside science, religion, all the other aspects of life. It's this magic realm.
Yeah, it really is. It goes outside of the everyday world. It's actually the synchronicity is the borderline of the connection between the everyday world and a deeper reality, and because
it may be our most conscious experience of that underlying reality.
Yeah, because it's experiences where you have an inner event and an outer event come together, similar events come together without cause and effect.
And they're meaningful to the person it happens.
Right. For example, just as an example, if I thought of somebody I knew in college and hadn't seen for decades, and that person was on my mind, and then a couple hours later, I get a friend's request on Facebook from this very person who I hadn't talked to for years and years. So that's an inner event experience with an outer event, that person contacting me, and it was meaningful to me, of course. And but there's no cause and effect, because I hadn't written that person a letter or made any effort to look for that person in the everyday world. It just had come together like that.
Well, that to me shows that we're connected to some kind of morphogenic field, the grid, the continuum, or something, that our communication isn't always on that 3D level, picking up the phone or writing an email, but it's so your thought went out there and they picked it up, and their thought came back to manifesting it as a Facebook connection request. Right. So that's fascinating.
Well, in some ways, I think the Internet actually facilitates synchronicity just because of the rapid exchange of communication and information.
It's it's a mixed bag, but I love the Internet because, we know so many people that we would never, 100 years ago, we would have never met. The volume of people that we meet because of the Internet and, all this communication. And even 100 years ago, the phone wasn't sufficient. We had to come to this new modern age of communication, the Internet. But of course, they can also, the other side is monitor everything we do.
Yeah,
exactly. Right.
Yes, it's a double-edged sword.
The government seem to be interested in monitoring people who have an interest in UFOs and write about them too. We found that out.
Well, let's explore that. Just for our listeners who haven't listened before, I am a contactee experiencer lifelong, and I've had conscious experiences. And Trish and Rob have been investigating these cases, and I listened to a fabulous interview that they had on George Norrie on Coast to Coast. So I think I put that on my website for you to click through, and you can listen to that. I recommend it. It was very interesting. But let's start with us here in this now. Tell us about this book, Aliens in the Backyard, UFOs, Abductions, and Synchronicity. And I'll shut up for a little while. Let you talk. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, let me start out by saying this, it started out for us. I mean, we had not written any book about UFOs at all, but yet here one day we get an email from a man in rural Quebec outside of Montreal who wants to talk to us about his startling experience that he hasn't been able to talk to anybody about because he's so frightened about it, and he doesn't want to ruin his career, and he's very upset about what happened because this man, we call him in our book Charles Fontaine because he doesn't want to use his real name. He works in the aeronautical engineering field in Montreal, and it wouldn't be good for him to have this knowledge out about his experience. So he contacted us through email, and in a few weeks, or maybe it was a couple of months after his experience. And what happened is, after his experience, which I'll go into a little bit, or Trish can, he started having all these crazy synchronicities, meaningful coincidence everywhere. Like his neighbor, his next-door neighbor, who he had hardly ever seen. He lives in a rural area, and the closest neighbor is someone who was connected with this experience in a way. He started seeing that person everywhere he went. He would drive, he would be in a restaurant or a shop 20 miles away from home, and there would be that person. And it's like they turned around and looked at each other and said, I'm not following you, are you following me? Over and over, this kind of thing. And
but the way it started was the synchronicity. With 7 secrets.
Right, yeah. The way he contacted us was all these, he walked into a bookstore one day in Montreal, and he's not a person who reads a lot of books because all day long he's reading technical journals and for ordering parts for airplanes. And so he doesn't, when he comes home, he doesn't really feel like reading a book. You just will, relax, maybe watch television or a movie or something. So, but he had an urge to go into this bookstore in Montreal, and he only picks up one book. And the name of this book, it's a French edition to a book called The 7 Secrets of Synchronicity. It's a book that Trish and I wrote a few years ago, and he takes it home. And he starts reading about synchronicity and these stories, and he gets partway through the book, puts it down, and goes online and Googles the words UFOs and synchronicity. And up pops this picture, this image, which is very of a craft with the beams of light coming down from it into a field, and he's startled because that's very similar to what happened to him
in his backyard.
And so,
wow, I'm going to Google that.
So then he clicked into what this was, and it turned out to be a blog with a blog post. And then he's really startled because he realizes that blog is our blog, the writers of the book he's reading. And so there's this kind of double synchronicity. Not only the image is familiar, but it's on a blog that related to
that you had posted.
Right, yeah, and he's reading
Amazing.
Our book at the same time. So he knows he wants to he needs to contact us, and that's how we initially got in contact with you. Trish, you want to tell him about the beginning of this story about the graveyard?
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible. But actually, his experience started, like 10 days or 2 weeks before, Rob, was it?
Before the UFO experience.
Yeah. He was in a graveyard with his father, and they were taking snapshots of some of the gravestones because they were doing some genealogy stuff. And they were looking for family tombstones is what it was. And
right. And my mother used to do that with my sister. When they do genealogy, they do that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't familiar with doing it that way, but hey, in Florida we don't have too many old gravestones except in St. Augustine. So he started jotting down the birth and death dates on 3 sheets of paper that listed the family names. But then this chilling gust of wind came up, making it really difficult to write. So he backtracked to the car for his digital camera and began snapping photos of the gravestones. At some point, I guess there was a mist or a fog that rose up along with the bitter cold. And he heard his father call out to him.
Yeah, he lost track of his father.
Wow.
not that large of a graveyard, old graveyard by a church, and he doesn't see his father anymore. And he hears his father calling out to him from a distance, and the message that his father is yelling for him to get away from that gravestone, and his father says he heard that in his head, that like a voice telling him, get your son away from that gravestone. And so he yells at him to move away. And it turns out this gravestone is somebody who died about 4 months earlier, and it was a family member.
One of his father's brothers.
But there was a big conflict in the family, that there was a split in the family, and the father didn't go to the funeral because of this problem. And so there was this tension in the family that seemed to bleed over into the afterlife. And so,
wow.
So now, what does this have to do with UFOs? You might wonder. Well, so what happens?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, it's a complicated story.
We're working our way there. So what happens is they leave the graveyard, and he has to then take his daughter to work. And to her job, and they get in the car, and he's driving off, and suddenly he feels very embarrassed that he thinks he's peed in his pants or something. So he pulls over to a gas station, runs into the restroom, opens his pants, and his pants are full of blood. And he's just really startled. He doesn't know what's happened to him, and
he was afraid that his father had colon cancer 20 years earlier,
right?
But was saved by surgery. He was his head, of course, immediately goes to, oh my God, I've got colon cancer.
Yeah, and so he immediately goes to the emergency room and gets checked out and goes to a specialist, and it turns out they're completely baffled. They have no idea where that blood came from. He has no polyps or anything, and
wow.
It's just they're completely baffled. They know what his story is, but they don't know where that blood came from and how it happened. So that was
that was the precursor.
That was the precursor to that happened. And there's a little connection if you know some about abduction cases and what some of the experiments that happen on abductees, with anal probes, there could be some kind of connection there. There could have been some kind of time loss or things that they don't remember. So anyhow, so 9 days later, he is awakened at 3:00 in the morning by the dog, their little dog. The dog's name is Spot, actually. And Spot starts barking. Original name.
The dog named Spot. Okay.
Spot starts barking wildly and jumps up on the bed and they
refuse to get down.
To get down, and so they find. He's just freaking out. So they finally calm the dog down, and he go back to sleep. But then he always gets up about 5:00 anyhow, because he's got to get ready, take his daughter to college, and then get to work on time in Montreal. And so he's up at 5 in the morning, and what he always does is opens the back door so the dog can go out and do its business. So he does that, but the dog refuses to budge. He won't go outside. And so he pushes him with his foot, pushes him outside, and then he steps outside and he looks and he sees these beams of light. Like, I think he counted 9 beams of light in the field behind the house. So his property backs up to a farmer's field, and there's some black object up in the sky that he can't make out what it is, and these beams of light, and he's fascinated by these beams of light because there's some kind of energy swirling around inside of each one, and it's going upward, and it's like they're in the shape of cones, like upside down ice cream cones, and this energy is coming up from the ground, moving upward, and he watches and he's fascinated. And then after 2-3 minutes, he says he realizes he's got to get his wife out here to see it. So he goes and wakes her up, and she comes out, and she's looking at it, and she says to him, "That's what I saw 2 weeks ago. I started telling you about this, and you were watching television, and you thought I was talking about deer crossing my path in the road when I was driving home." And so and they're watching it, and then all of a sudden there's a craft comes right into the backyard. It's saucer shaped, but it's like a coin standing on its edge. It's moving vertical right into the backyard, and there's like a swirling lights around the edges of it, and like little blue objects inside these lights that are swirling around. And then he can see the metallic shape of the craft as it's moving towards him, and so it's pretty close now. And so he turns to reach for the dog. He sees the dog surrounded by a gold light, and that's the last thing he remembers. The next thing he knows, he's taking a shower, and he has no idea how he got in the shower. He has no idea what happened, where his wife is, where the dog is, and his wife turned out to be in bed, and she has some trouble sleeping sometimes, but she said she had just the best sleep, and she felt like she was just lifted and sunk right into that mattress like she weighed 500 pounds and passed out. Wow. And the dog is in the house. And so he doesn't know what's happened, but this is a case where there may be a compression of time, because it's like no time has passed. Right. It's not missing time. It's not like 2 hours are missing, but no time is missing. And suddenly he's on his way to work, taking his daughter to college, and
he gets to work on time even.
He gets to work on time, but
so
then he just breaks down.
Let me ask one question.
Yeah.
How old is this man and his wife? Approximate age?
When it happened, he was 49.
49.
Yeah.
And
when
so
it happened.
You said his father was the one that was I got confused. Who at the gravesite at the cemetery was the one that had the bloody pants? Was that his father?
That was him. No, that was Charles.
No, that was him. That was Charles.
That was Charles.
Yeah.
Okay.
So after he
49,
left,
he thinks he. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So after he left the graveyard, that's when that experience happened. What happened with his father is the one who heard this voice in his head to get your son away from that gravestone.
Uh-huh.
So anyhow, what ensued is that he felt afterwards that there is some kind of connection between the spirit world and the UFOs, because afterwards he felt like he decided he wanted to sleep in the basement after this, where there's a wood burning stove, and he had a baseball bat next to him because he
was afraid.
He was afraid, and
he was afraid. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, and so but he felt beings around him that he couldn't see, and this went on for weeks, and a number of strange experiences happened to him. He couldn't sleep. He kept waking up and trying to sleep, and waking up and waking up. So finally, one night he went out to a pharmacy. He was driving to a friend's house and stopped at a pharmacy to see if he could get something to help him sleep. And so he's looking around, and the pharmacist, he talks to an assistant, and she says, "Let me get the pharmacist. He can help you." So the man comes over, and all he says is, "I need something to help me sleep." And the man stares at him, looks at him, and says, "Where did it happen? In the house or outside the house?"
Oh, no.
And
so these are the kinds of things that kept happening to him.
The pharmacist knew he had a UFO experience, and he writes down a number and a name and says, "Talk to this man. He'll help you out." and also,
who was that man?
the man was a microbiologist in Montreal who was very knowledgeable about UFOs and alien abductions. So they eventually got together a couple of times. So it's just these strange coincidences, like people in the know, people who know too much. How could this pharmacist know what happened to him? He didn't say anything.
It sounds like an episode out of the Twilight Zone or Outer Limits. If you, my generation grew up watching Outer Limits. Like you go and everybody knows everything. It's like, whoa, this is too bizarre. But this was his real experience. That's fascinating. Go ahead, Trish.
Yeah.
What did you want
to say?
I
was going to say there was a follow-up to this. They're French-Canadian Catholics. So everybody in the family started carrying holy water around with them. And so,
that's the best.
They all had vials of holy water.
As I guess a protective.
Just put that on the graves. Put that on his aliens.
Well, what he did, at some point, we asked him if he would mail us a vial of holy water that he had been carrying, so that we could take it to a spiritualist community north of Orlando, where we knew a psychometrist. Mm-hmm. And the day we went up there, Rob says, why don't you go in with the holy water, but don't tell her what it is? And I said, that's fine, because she reads virtually anything. And anything you've been wearing, jewelry, a phone, whatever. So I went in, saw Kathy Adams, and I said, okay, I've got something I'd like you to give me your impressions of. And she said, okay. And I handed her the vial. Now, she's an RN, and she later told me she thought it was a vial of urine. So she couldn't imagine why I was handing her a bottle of urine. But anyway, she held it for a while and did her thing, and she said, I'm going to quote this. I did tell her that he was from Canada.
Okay.
She says there's a lot of stuff going on around him, but not necessarily spiritual stuff, but abnormal occurrences. She said he's having a difficult time knowing what's real and what isn't. His significant other is going against what he wants to do. She just wants to forget what happened. And Kathy paused and rubbed her fingers over the vial again. She goes, a gentleman who lives far away from him is trying to help. That was Rob. And this gentleman, the Canadian, is telling him more and more. You know both of these men, she says to me. Then she said, someone who passed away, a relative, has been trying to communicate with this gentleman, meaning with Charles. And I figured that this reference had to relate to his eerie experience in the cemetery and to his uncle who had died a few weeks earlier. Then she said, this gentleman has other spirits around him now who aren't related to him, a different set of guides who are trying to help him place things in perspective. Then I offered her some history. I told her the guy had a UFO encounter and was so freaked out that he started carrying the holy water to protect himself. Then that's when she revealed that she thought it was urine. And then she says, I said, does the holy water tell you anything about the encounter? She said, yes, they won't be back. This was a one-time deal. So I said, was he abducted? And she said, definitely. And I said, but for what purpose? And the answer was kind of shocking to me. She says, for entertainment.
Okay.
that is, very strange response. A very unusual thing. We never think of these abductions as being a form of entertainment. But
who knows? Flipping around and say, oh, well, who could we abduct tonight?
Yeah. The thing about Charles and his wife is they previously had no interest in this subject. They weren't people who read books about UFOs and aliens, and Charles was not a believer, and he thought that UFOs and aliens were something that was coming out of Hollywood in the movies and television shows. And that if there really was such a thing, that the U.S. government would have told us a long time ago, and the military would have told us a long time ago, which is a kind of laughable situation.
Yes.
We know about the secrecy involved in this subject, but so he is somewhat naive in that regard, because he really hadn't thought about this subject. And one of the things that Kathy Adams said, the psychometrist, that really hit on Mark was about how he reacted to this experience and how his wife did. He was just crushed by this experience.
Yeah, it blew open his worldview. I mean, it just...
He was... He, every day he would be, close his office and he would be crying, and he would come home and he would, be just really upset and crying. And so it was just really a difficult situation for him. Meanwhile, his wife didn't take it that way at all. She said, let's just look at this as something remarkable that happened to us that most people have never experienced and will never experience, and we did, and just let it go at that and forget about it. She's very blasé about it. But for Charles, he couldn't. It just turned his life around. And I think the difference in the two reactions is related to his wife has had previous experiences.
There you go.
Yeah, that is the whole key. She is the key person, and I would love if she would be willing to be regressed, because she had this experience 2 weeks earlier where she was driving home, and do you remember that story, Trish?
Yeah, and she had to stop because she thought she saw a bunch of deer in a field.
Oh, yeah.
And then suddenly she was, 300 yards farther down the road, and she didn't remember getting in the car and driving there.
Yeah, and there's also this light, as she was driving along, this light was beaming down, and she finally had to stop to see where what this light, where it was coming from, and that's when she stepped out, and she just notices these deer that are just laying down in a field across the road, and then the next thing she knows, she's like 300 yards down the road from her car. So there's a kind of a loss of time and experience there, where she doesn't know what happened. And then it goes back. Then later on, much later on, from the time that we first started talking, Charles told me that he now recalled that his wife had mentioned, and her parents had mentioned that when she was young, there were some UFO experiences that were happening on their property, which was not too many miles away from where they're presently living. And he was not a believer. He just dismissed it as a missighting or something that they didn't understand what they saw, and he never paid any attention to it. But now it was coming back to him. So there is something going on here that's a little deeper, I think.
Great. So it's more than entertainment. There's some reason why that space has been targeted.
Yeah.
So wow.
The interesting thing about Charles, so this happened in 2000, in the winter, I think February
2011.
Of 2011. So he turned from being a non-believer of aliens to being a believer, and then remarkably to being a non-believer again. And which it just happened within the last few months. And so you might wonder, how could this be? How could he be a non-believer? And the thing is, he is still very hung up on this spiritual connection. He knows there's been some spirit contact related to this whole thing. And he finally, what he concluded was that the whole thing was demonic, and that UFOs, aliens, it's all a demonic experience. And he just kind of, for him, it just became a way of explaining it, because he doesn't see any possibility of anything positive coming out of it, and he just sees it as this kind of negative spiritual experience, and probably because of his background as a Catholic, and he doesn't like when I say that he always emails me and says, I'm not really a Catholic. But Charles, you were carrying
our program.
Charles, he may not be devout Catholic now, but it is something that he grew up with. and
right,
that,
and that goes in. That's your programming that you get at your mother's breast, so to speak. That's your imprinting, your programming. I work with my husband, psychological counselors, and so that's what we're talking about: working on your religious, cultural conditioning, and your programming that you get from when you're born. And then you come in with the antivirus. So you come in and you're programmed to be a certain religion, and then you have the antivirus against other belief systems, and they fight to dominate your consciousness, and they're your controlling factors. But you're still in reaction. You're programmed in your reaction to your programming. So he's not in his center. Of course, he's trying to cope with something that's outside of your reality. Unless you do some intensive therapy on it, you come up with your explanation, which is rational to your own mind. Yeah. Go ahead.
And I've tried, discuss some with him through emails over the last few months about this, and suggesting the idea that it's difficult to just pigeonhole all these UFO experiences as demonic, because some people have these experiences that they feel are very beneficial, and so he's kind of, I think, more or less thinks that at least his ones were demonic, and maybe not everybody else's. But
so when he's saying demonic, what is he saying? Satan did it? Is that what he's saying? Is it? I think
so.
What does he mean by that? Satan did it. Okay.
Maybe he's listening. Maybe he'll call in and tell us. I don't know.
I didn't do it. Well,
no, it's not really something to laugh about either. It's because it's really affected his life, and it's I don't mean to, I'm not trying to make fun of that are helping people to go deeper, because if you agree to go into a hypnosis session, and this isn't 100%, but most times you'll get more details and it'll make sense. Yeah. And I had one was a being that was in this. I'll just real quick here. I would meet this was in my neighbor's backyard, which faced my back. It was
You're fading out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you now. Yes.
My headset shifted. Anyway, this reptilian would try to suck my soul out of my third eye chakra. And of course, as a child, I thought it was very frightening, and my conditioning was demonic. When I
you faded out again. No. Yeah, you're breaking up.
Okay.
We can't hear you.
We're going to move from the headset to the phone itself. This reptilian was actually trying to show me how to communicate with him, and he needed me to go astral.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it's all an interpretation. Yeah. So
this guy's trying to take my soul and kill me and this and that. Okay, back to broadcasting.
Oh, you're breaking up again.
Okay,
Can you hear us?
Not doing anything. I can hear you. But
okay.
Go ahead. You talk for a while. Just listen.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm breaking up, but
you mentioned that having some if Charles would speak to a psychiatrist, psychologist about his experience. Well, he did go into Montreal to have hypnotic regression. He decided to do this. He found someone who would be willing to take him back, but it didn't work for him. It was the person got the story wrong and guided him in the wrong direction into it, and it just nothing really happened. But he wasn't really upset that it happened, because the way he was, he felt at that time, he said, at least I was able to rest and have somebody watch over me, and I was safe. That's,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
Well, it's not always, the first person isn't always the right one for you.
Yeah,
and there's a level of trust. You go into hypnotherapy, And I know when I was dealing with my issues, I went shopping for the right therapist, and I didn't actually find. Each one did a little bit, it was like a cumulative effect. And finally, when I got the one that really worked for me, it ended up being my husband, and I married him. I said, "Dude, because I had a lifelong experiences, and actually it was the most perfect thing. My higher self for guidance."
Well,
it's because then we got
really
to go
hard.
through.
It's hard for people who are abductees to find a qualified therapist.
Yeah.
We've gotten inquiries from a lot of people, and just we don't know what to tell them.
Yeah, especially in Canada. For some reason, we get contacted from people in Canada. It's like the third one recently that was looking for help, and there is a psychologist we know in Montreal who has actually written a book about. He's a psychiatrist, actually, who's written a book about UFOs and aliens, but unfortunately, he doesn't do regressions himself, but he recently mentioned somebody else he knows that does it, so
we can actually do Skype sessions now. We live out in Maui, and it's really hard for people to get to us, and I'm not selling our services because I couldn't take care of all the millions anyway. We need a whole network of therapists. We have so many hours a day. And what I'm working with other therapists is let's do some Skype sessions with people. All they really need to do is be able to put, their cell phone or their iPad or something by their head with Skype. You can download the app anywhere now, and light out, and then you can be hypnotized wherever you are, and the therapist can be wherever they are, because there are literally millions.
Wow, through Skype? That's amazing.
We've been experimenting with it, and it does work. My husband's done a few sessions, and it does work. So, and you do need to get into a timeless system. So I know some like traditional therapists, you have to do 40 minutes and it's X amount of dollars, but to be effective, you have to go into a timeless space with your, the therapist and the experiencer, because in the 45 minutes that you get to the story, it just.
Yeah, Janet,
go ahead.
I'd like to ask you a question. Your experiences, how do you see them overall? As negative or positive or a combination?
Well, I've spent a lifetime examining my experiences and reflecting on it and getting more and more information, and I think it's part of evolving and becoming a conscious being. So through all my experiences, I have connected with my multidimensional eternal self, which is a mouthful. But basically, we are all multidimensional eternal beings that are having these experiences, and many of us are having experiences simultaneously on many planets and many dimensions. It depends on the age of the soul. I'm a very, very old soul, and younger souls may be just having one or two or three experiences. But I actually now, from doing this, I'm going to be 61, my birthday, February 6th. I've been doing this intensive therapy because I married my therapist, and we've been together 18 years. When I go to sleep at night, it's that, is conscious. A lot of that is conscious, and I access where I'm going to. And I'm saying this because I want everybody else to realize that it's possible to do this yourself. I'm not anything special. I'm not magical. I'm just another soul having experience here, and it's possible to access this all. But it started with me in the crib and having contact and being, I've had babies, I've had the whole traditional story. In fact, following the traditional story about, the implants, and I start with Bud Hopkins, and David M. Jacobs, and I met John Mack. And John Mack was a colleague of my husband's. I've had a very unusual path, but, so I'm kind of like first generation experiencer, but I kept it private because who do you tell, right? And, but I've started.
What was it like working with John Mack?
Well, John Mack was actually, it was fascinating. He did not do regression with me. I was at the Prophets Conference with John and my husband, and they studied together under Stanislav Grof, if you've heard of Stan Grof.
Right, yeah.
They were studying, they were in his second certification program. So we're going back to the 80s, maybe through the 90s. And my husband, Sasha, he's Dr. Lesson, Sasha was with John, and they were discussing what John was starting to get in his sessions. So they would go 2 weeks, I don't know, it was like 6 times a year, 2 weeks intensive studying with Stan Grof, and Grof was getting all these things when he did the holotropic breath work. If you know the history of Grof, he
did a fascinating book on it.
Oh, he's done several books, but they started with real LSD, which goes through the limbic system. This is before when it was legal, and our government gave it to him to do the trials. And so he went through like 10, 20 years of all that, and then they made it illegal. But he learned how to do holotropic breathing, which would get people to about the same state. Shamanistic. It's a shamanistic approach, and they get many extraterrestrials. And so we did 30 years of holos here at where we live. So it was with Dr. Lesson, his previous wife, and then I came here in '97, and we did another, I'd say, 10 years of holotropic breathing, breathwork in a group type thing. And so this is a phenomenon that is global, and it happens all over the place. Some people don't want to talk about it. They just have their experience. They go home, But now we have more and more people that are having these experiences in the books and the YouTubes and the radio shows. And like you said earlier, it's more common than we think. Yeah.
We've been working with a woman who's a retired veterinarian who has been having 20 years of experiences. And she actually sets aside time every day to interact with these energies. And for her, it's incredibly beneficial. I mean, don't you think, Rob, that Sandy is...
She sees it as a very positive experience, and she's... describes these beings in details, and they sometimes have appeared physically to her, but mostly as only partially physical beings, and they perform some kind of energy work on her body during these experiences, and sometimes the whole bed makes a wave. It's like heavy waves. The whole bed is moving, and her husband has been in bed right next to her and felt the same experience as she has. So it's not just like it's something going on in her head. And her first husband was also heavily involved in these experiences. They got to the point that they couldn't be together any longer. But
he was also a veterinarian. It completely freaked him out.
Yeah, and he's still a vet, and he has lots of journals that I'm trying to get my hands on from these experiences.
Well, it can be freaky if you're an experiencer and you have a partner. And I just say partner because it could be male or female, right? And I had an episode. I would warn my boyfriends. I was married for many, many years, and then I was single for a while, so I was dating and experimenting a little bit. And I'd say, okay, you sure you want to sleep with me because things happen to me when you might want to go home, after we have sex, right? But at one time, his name was Jason. He's no longer with us. He's crossed over, but it was a fascinating episode. So we're in bed. We wake up, and first of all, we're lying on our backs, and I always sleep on my side. And we're both lying on our backs, and our eyes open at the same time. You can see, like, our eyes open, and then we look at each other, and we're going, well, this is strange. We're just lying here on our backs, stick to the board. And then we see something out of the corner of our eyes, and I peel down, simultaneously we peel down the blanket, and we see blood. And then we, at the same time, just flip it off of us. The whole bed is soaked in blood. What is with the blood, guys? And it was everywhere. And we just started looking at each other. It was on both sides of the bed. He's there, are you on your period? I don't know. I'm not. And he just said very coolly, he says, okay. And he started getting the spray and wash, right? And we're just going to wash these sheets, and we're never going to talk about this again. So that's how we handled it. So what is the blood guy? You had the guy with the bloody pants, but there's nothing wrong with him. And there I was with the bed of blood.
That's fascinating.
Nothing. There was a spot on either of us.
Huh. Wow.
That is weird.
It's very strange.
Was this your husband or a boyfriend?
Yeah. No, this was Jason. He was the boyfriend I had before I met my husband.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't stay with him because he was an alcoholic. I just couldn't handle it. But he gave me. We loved each other. He gave me his blessings to move on. He said, "I'm never going to get married. You need to be married." He said, "This is just a fill-in relationship." So we had that agreement. We were very conscious about our relationship.
But you never talked about that experience?
No, not again. No, because he wasn't into it. He just said, "Look, I used to be into meditation. I used to do all this stuff." He says, "I'm not into that in this phase of my life. You can go do all the workshops. You can go do all the groups and everything." He's there. That was just a phase, and I'm doing something else with my life. And he had too much trauma. That's why he was an alcoholic, and I could never get to him. I didn't have the psychological skills until I met my husband to help him work through it, and he ended up dying of his alcoholism. And he was like 54 or something, and he didn't make it very long. So, but he got to experience that. Sure, go ahead.
Do you think that John Mack was killed?
I do. I think he, from what I heard, he was having a conversation with Rupert Sheldrake. I think so, yes. I mean, I think he was a little bit absent-minded, but I walked with him. I heard people say, "Well, he never paid attention." And I go, "No, we walked." Because when I was at this conference for like a 4-day weekend, he loved and Sasha, and those two were brothers, not by birth, but they were just so bonded from this experience of studying with Stan Grof for 3 years, going to all these workshops together all over the world. And my husband at one point had money, so they could just do this stuff, So we would walk around. We'd walk around town in between, when the conference was taking a break. So I saw him walking down the streets. He wasn't absent-minded. He paid as much attention as we did, and I didn't see him having any interactions. So I think he was. I think he was run over. Yeah.
Maybe pushed out into the road in front of a vehicle.
Yeah, I think the guy jumped the curb or something. Didn't the guy jump the curb?
Yeah, I think so. I've always been curious about that though, because here he was a Harvard professor, and here he was investigating something that was just a complete taboo.
And still is a taboo.
Yeah, and still is for scientists.
In the academic world.
He was way ahead of his time, and I think it's probably because he worked with Stan Grof, because there you're looking at all the different non-ordinary states of reality, and you're having people that are having pre-birth experiences. They remember their birth process. They remember other lives. They remember in between. So it's like you said earlier in the show, it's like there's a connection between the UFOs and, we were talking about ghosts. I know you've written some books about ghosts. I've had many, the whole spirit world. So he was very, very open-minded, and so was my husband, and that's why I could end up with him and do all this therapy, because, therapists aren't supposed to lead the witness. You were talking about the whoever got the session, that therapist was leading the witness. You're supposed to tarry with people in their journey, and you facilitate the process, but the person actually does the work, and then you say, "Good work, you did the work."
Mm-hmm.
So bad when people are, and I've seen it, and I cringe when a therapist leads the witness, and I don't know what happens behind closed doors if people are getting good therapy. But my husband never led me, and he created a safe space and allowed for the memories to come forth, and they're there. They're all there. And so once they start emerging, then I have mysteries in my life, and I'll say, "Honey, we need to explore this. Can we do a session on mystery number 25?" And we will do that. And it blows my mind, the details that come out.
Yeah.
But they're right underneath the surface.
Right. I think it's interesting that you've mentioned that you've had contact with both John Mack and David Jacobs, because they are, were explorers, and David Jacobs still is, I believe, explorers in this field of alien encounters, but they seem to be on the opposite end.
Right.
John Mack felt they were essentially positive experiences, where David Jacobs sees them as negative, and he sees this as a very bad situation that's evolving with these experiences. And Trish and I, the way we've thought about it is that you can't really put it into one or the other, that it's a mixed bag, because there's probably there could be dozens of different types of beings that are visiting us, and it's not one monolithic situation of a certain type of beings that are attempting to either take over the world or space brothers trying to save us.
Right, even the individuals, it's just like human beings. You have Hitlers and Jesus, right? So
Right,
the individuals, they
Yeah.
might have their collective agenda, but you have, some that are, able to handle and deal with humans more kindly and gently than others. So, I'm open-minded, so I want to hear what everybody's saying. I met John Mack, I met Bud Hopkins. Haven't had a session, but I've had some conversations. David Jacobs, I only wrote, I think it was 1 or 2 letters. And this was back because we didn't have internet back then. I've been studying this since the 60s because I started having experiences in the 50s.
We actually saw Bud Hopkins do a regression, and that was pretty fascinating. He was at one of the UFO conferences that we had gone to, and he had been on a radio show. It was right after, shortly after Missing Time came out, and he was on a radio show, and a woman called in, and she lived up the road a piece, and he didn't have a car, so we drove him up there, and it was very interesting to see him work.
Yeah, we got a chance to be, just be right on the inside with him in a case where he did a regression. He thought he had several callers, but this one in particular sounded very genuine, and the woman was very frightened by what he was talking about, and so that was an interesting experience because she, when she went into this regression, she recalled.
It was really strange.
Yeah, she recalled being floated right out of her bedroom down the hall by these. There were 2 or 3 grays, and actually right through the wall. Not through an open door or a window, but right through the wall and out to like a beam of light that went up to a ship, and they just rose up in this beam of light, rising up towards this ship, and she was with these little beings, and she was conscious.
But explain where she lived.
Yeah, well, she lived in Lantana, Florida, and at the time, she lived about 2 miles from the National Enquirer headquarters, and this was back in the 80s when National Enquirer was like the only tabloid publication even that was writing regularly about UFOs and alien abductions and that sort of thing. And so this was at Christmas time, and the National Enquirer had this fantastic 2 or 3 acre Christmas display with a huge tree of 50, 60 foot with
fully decorated,
and she said she was looking down upon that display from this beam of light to this like light elevator they're rising up on, and looking at that huge Christmas tree from above, and she pointed it out to the aliens, and Bud asked, "What did they think?" And she said in this very calm voice, "They weren't impressed." That was one of our Omni stories. Maybe it was because the National Enquirer. I don't know.
Because the National Enquirer was in the. Well, I didn't get to experience his. I've been in many regressions, and sometimes people will just come because they're working on their relationship or some other issue, and you regress them, and all of a sudden they've got an extraterrestrial experience. So, you have to be prepared for that as a therapist. Also, sometimes they get into possession and demonics, and so we've done a lot of exorcisms. I learned working with Dr. Lesson's like, you don't know what you're going to get. The people who come in for whatever they think they're coming in for, when you get down underneath it, you just have to be prepared. So I'm surprised that more traditional therapists aren't encountering extraterrestrial things, or they might be steering people away from it and, implanting their own explanations for what's going on. I cringe when I think about that. Yeah.
Well, we have a friend, Carol Bowman, who's written 2 books on children's past lives, and she was on Oprah. And now she has an active regression practice, but she only does past life stuff because I approached her and asked her, there was one abductee who really wanted to be regressed, and she said, Trish, that's really specific stuff, and I'm not qualified to do that. She said, my thing is pre-birth experiences and the past life. It's the healing aspect.
And that's what they do. They compartmentalize it like that, like you have a brain surgeon and a heart surgeon.
Right.
But in our practice, you can't do that. Whatever's coming out of the client, you have to be prepared, and you can't go, I'm not going to. I mean, at least this is what my perspective is. I'm not going to stop and say, no, I'm not prepared for that. We're not going to listen to that. No, I just let it go.
Well, it's not that she was afraid of it or anything. She just didn't feel that. She said, suppose, you get to a point in the regression where the client's freaking out. She said, how I'm not equipped to deal with that.
What
in terms
we do
of
is
UFOs
we encourage them to crank it up, because if you crank it up and cathart it, underneath you come out the other side, and they actually go through it, they move through it, and then it's healed and it's released, and they can allow another energy in. But as long as you keep suppressing it, it's like coitus interruptus. It's like they keep putting Band-Aids over a deep wound, and they actually need someone that's able to, I had a therapist that was doing a past life one, and for me, and this is before I met my husband, and I literally at one point, I'm a tiny woman, only 5'2", and I leapt up off of the what it was like a table she had me on, and I crawled into her lap.
Oh,
it was a very frightening extraterrestrial experience, but she didn't stop it. She just, she calmed, she just listened. You don't say now stop crying. You just let the person.
Right.
Eventually I got to a point where I was like, okay, I can breathe. And she said, well, honey, you need to find a therapist in this. But back then, that was in 89 or something, 90? Where in the world do you find a therapist? But that's why I started writing to my God and everybody. And anyway, back to you.
Yeah. Well, actually, during that time, there was one in South Florida or Central Florida, Vero Beach, a man named Dr. Berthold Schwarz, who wrote a couple books about UFO.
He was a psychiatrist.
And he had some very interesting experiences with both different types of paranormal phenomena, mysticism, and UFOs and abductees. And we took a man that was staying with us for a while that had a very unusual UFO abduction. I guess they're all unusual, but his
was really strange.
His took place on Halloween, and he was going to a Halloween party, and he was dressed up like a pirate. And the guy he was with was dressed up like a clown, and they were on this rural road heading to this party that was out a ways, and this beam of light came on. The car came over them, and the car just stopped, and they got out, and these beings are there, and just they're unable to run or do anything. They just are walked over. These beings just walk them over to this craft, and when they get to the craft, there's this whole line of people that they've stopped and that are going into this slowly being processed into this craft. So I always get this image of this line of people outside a UFO, and including a clown and a pirate.
I mean, it's just the theater of the absurd,
Well, do they have any insight on what was going on?
During his
lighting people up?
Well, during his regression with Dr. Schwarz, everything came out. He just sobbed throughout the entire regression. I mean, it was really emotional, and He described being naked on a table and probed and examined.
And he also saw these this writing, this script on the walls, and he reproduced it, and it's kind of like hieroglyphic type of symbols. And I used to have a copy of that and lost it a long time ago, but it's kind of interesting. It's just going through this whole experience that people have had over and over again, and it's a fascinating thing about these abductions, because when you hear about UFO abductions, the story is always, this is what happened to me. You never hear, I saw these people being abducted by these aliens, and I don't know of any case where
no witnesses.
There's witnesses of watching, except maybe with the
with Travis Walton and Kim Peterson. I mean, that was a group of bloggers.
That may have been.
Well, this is a case in New York where the woman was taken out of the high rise, and then the people.
Hopkins story.
Yeah, Hopkins story too.
Right.
Yeah, remember that one?
Yeah, but see, that happened before the internet. I mean, if there had actually been witnesses, I would have been all over YouTube and. Everybody would have known about it.
Yeah, where are the witnesses? That's the problem, because I think these are.
I had a shared experience where there were two of us, and so
right, and that's with also with Charles Fontaine. It's a shared experience with his wife, but they both had the experience. And the thing is, I think these experiences are both internal and external experiences.
It all has to do with consciousness.
And I think they have some ability, they have some relationship with our minds that we don't understand with consciousness. That is, they're telepathic. They seem to know.
They're very telepathic. That's all they do is telepathy. So let me just share a little bit about the telepathy. It's not like they put words in your head and you hear words. It's concepts. And I've been in a group of 1,000 people, and I don't know if this is common or is this something that I can do or is this something I don't understand. But basically, this whole group, you could hear the individual conversations, the concepts, right? And everybody was doing it at the same time. So somehow we were outside of time and space. Like you said, no time passed.
Right.
And all this communication, my symbology is like a bee in a hive. And every bee in the hive knew what every other bee in the hive was thinking or saying at the same time.
Wow.
So that was I've only a couple times,
Well, this Sandy, this retired veterinarian, has had some, what she describes as actual time travel experiences during some of her interactions. Like, remember that story she told us about how...
It was like a time travel.
Yes. Yeah, it's like a time slip. And Whitley Strieber talks about that, too. I mean, he's had some strange time slips. Like with Sandy... Well, remember that one where she said she ended up at that conference of scientists?
Right.
And she turned to the woman next to her and she said, "What year is it?" And the woman said something like, "I'm not allowed to say."
Yeah, and she seemed to be aware that that Sandy was coming from another dimension, and she's had a.
Did she think she went future or past?
She didn't know. She thought it might be like interdimensional. Where she was actually in maybe a parallel dimension of some kind.
And I think the reason, and I got this from Ray Kostelandzich's interview, who's been with 32 different species, is they do a lot of astral taking because it can be physically damaging because of the radiation and their technology on our physical form. We're a pretty fragile form. So they do as much as they can astrally or with our other types of, spirit bodies than our physical form. Although I've had physical abductions, I've had children, and I've had stigmata, which is the markings. I've had the implants. In fact, the one implant they did behind my ear has kind of screwed up my hearing. It was always bad, but now I'm really getting deaf in my right ear, and I wish they would come back and fix it so I'm not deaf in my right ear. Thank you.
Have you ever had a missing pregnancy? Have you ever had a missing pregnancy?
I have. They didn't let me go far enough. I was tracking it because I was trying to have. I never had a live birth of a human child. But I've seen my children. They've shown them, and I'm not being used with the gray. I'm in a different experiment. I'm with the humanoid, and it's because I'm the bloodline. I've done all this research. I've got the O negative blood, so they have. I'm in a different breeding program. Okay.
Wow.
But yeah. So
because there's one
really
story.
Well,
there's one story that we used in Aliens in the Backyard about this woman who's also a lifetime experiencer. And in high school, she was diagnosed with cystic ovary disease, and the doctor told her, you probably won't ever get pregnant. But while she was living in a college town upstate New York, she went to her family doctor because she was feeling exhausted and nauseous. And after a urine test and a pelvic exam, he informed her she was 8 weeks pregnant. And the doctor was shocked because he was the one who had told her she could never get pregnant. And because she had had surgeries for these cysts, he said that her pregnancy was high risk, and he referred her to a clinic in Burlington, Vermont. At that time, in upstate New York, there was no specialty gynecologist or OB. So anyway, she and her two roommates, drove to Vermont, took 3 hours by car, including a ferry ride across Lake Champlain. And they left early because they hoped they could explore Burlington for a few hours before a late afternoon appointment at the clinic. And as they passed through the town of Denimora, which is where there used to be an insane asylum and a prison, for like 72 years, I think it was. All that really dark energy was still there. Okay. Anyway, just after they passed through Denimora, they ran into this thick bank of fog, and visibility shrank to practically zero. So they decided they better pull off the road and wait till the fog passed. So they saw this gravel driveway just off to their right, pulled in, and found themselves outside this big old barn that had been made into a bar restaurant. So they went inside to get out the fog, approached the counter, sat down, and there was an older couple with white hair behind the counter, and she remembers that they were really short, barely 5 feet. They were warm and friendly, and so they ordered some sodas. The minute she took the first sip of the soda, she has no memory until 2 hours later when they were at the ferry station preparing to cross to Burlington. And she gets to the clinic appointment, just practically barely makes the time. And the nurse practitioner does the pelvic and looks at the results, and she said, this is an unpregnant womb. And
they took
Diane said, was the doctor mistaken? And she says, no, your urine test was positive. His diagnosis can't be wrong, but you're not pregnant. And at that point, she really panicked because she knew what had happened in the fog.
That something had happened. So when they drove back, they decided to go back to that place. And when they got to Denimora, they found the road where they had turned off, and they went in there, and there's no bar or restaurant there.
Nothing there.
Oh, wow, that happens a lot. Yeah, so
it might have been like a
stereo.
Yeah, it could have been a craft that was shape-shifted to look like.
Do these types of things, these screen memories, so you don't panic, and they can create whatever they want. Why?
Yeah, right.
So
they kept taking mine. I was charting it because I was trying to get pregnant with my second husband, and we wanted to have. I was in my 30s, and we wanted to have a child. And so I knew when I was fertile, and they were coming. They were coming when I was fertile, and they came 2 weeks later. So they were implanting and harvesting in 2 weeks. They weren't letting me have a pregnancy or any kind of positive pregnancy test. They just kept, but that went on for like 2 or 3 years, and then I finally stopped with the infertility stuff when it was like, well, they weren't going to let me have one. And I never told my second husband because he was not of that mindset. He was very conservative, right? And he would have freaked out and wouldn't have believed me and would have thought I needed to go into an institution or something. So I didn't share that with him. But I had been studying and reading the lore, and even at that point, I said, if this is real, will you give me some proof? And so they, one time I was getting ready for work, and I was putting on my nylon stockings, and there was a V-shaped cut. This is middle of winter, right? I wasn't out working in the yard or anything. V-shaped cut that went from my right buttocks all the way up to my shoulder blades, and it was deep. And
wow.
And he goes, "What in the world's going on with you?" And I go, "What?" He goes, "Take a look." So I found a mirror, and I looked. I went, "Holy!" And so I got brave enough to show it to a couple of my friends, and it took 3 months to disappear. And at that time, this is synchronicity. I'm asking, well, what's going on? So I'm guided to read Dr. Edith Fiore. Remember her, Dr. Fiore?
Oh, yeah.
Her
Right.
book?
Yeah.
Yep.
She said that she and her husband returned one night with a V-shaped deep cuts in their backs, in both of their backs. That was the reptilians returned me to bed. And I went, oh, thank you. So,
Jeez.
you can freak out about all this stuff, but it's like, I think they all work together at the highest level. They have a federation, and they've never hurt me. I would, we suffer from the cat at the vet syndrome, right? I'm sure if you interviewed my cat after we brought her back from the vet, she would tell you that, oh, my God, they probed me and poked me and put things up the butt. And, she'd have her horror stories to tell you if she could talk. So we have a lot of that going on. I know that they've helped me. I've had some serious illnesses where I was close to death. I'm still here. I should have died many years ago. It's interesting you mentioned the disease. I was born with a cilia-type disease where my follicles don't move, and that's why I've never had a live birth. I think that was they can do genetic manipulation. I think they don't want some of us having live births so that we are, maybe, I don't think we're victims, I think we volunteer. That's what I got. I got that I am a volunteer, and I got that very clearly when I kept asking, please give me proof. And I'm going to give you the ball back to you. I'll just share this one more. August 31st, 1993, I got my proof in spades. They took me from Pennsylvania all the way to a place called Mount Madonna, California, and I ended up being there a few years later. And they showed me, just like the end of Spielberg's Close Encounter, all the craft shooting across. I mean, no two were alike, and they just kept coming. And then they cleared the skies of all the craft, and they were close up. They were like right above my head, and it went on for 15 minutes or so. And then they stopped, and then they rolled, like the clouds rolled over my head, like in Star Wars, but it was all cuneiform writing, and it was illuminated from above, and it was shining down. It was like, and I'm there, what does it mean? What does that mean? And I still don't know what it means. They said, don't worry, when it's time, you'll know this. You'll remember this, and you'll know exactly what that was saying. And then at the very end, there were a couple, it looked like Casper the friendly ghosts down in the field, and I, at that point, I was elated, and I ran off the balcony at this facility, and I ran down the hill, and as I got underneath it, I realized they weren't ghosts, they were grays. They were gray aliens, and they were flying, and they were like taunting me and followed me, so I followed them around the corner. As soon as I went around the corner, I got hit in the chest by a blue beam, and you know how they show people duck it, they're like, their arms are back and their chest is out and they're floating. That I was doing that, and then I started to pass out. So I was awake, and I said, "Don't, no, don't make me go unconscious. I want to go conscious." And they gently set me back down. They says, "We've never taken you against your will. You've done all of this by choice." And then I was returned to my bed all the way back in Pennsylvania. And a few years later, when I met my husband, we were at a place called Mount Madonna, and I went, oh my God, this is where they brought me, August 31st.
Well, were you taken there physically or astrally?
I think I was taken there physically because I could feel the wind on my face. It was a beautiful summer California night, and it was nice weather. I was there physically. I was in my bed one moment and there the next. So there wasn't a taking me or returning me, but I was there, and then I went, oh, this is real. I'm here. I'm not in a dream. It's physical. I'm touching things. And I can't tell you if it's real or not, but it was very, 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 very real to me. It's part of that synchronicity on top of synchronicity on top of synchronicity.
Right.
I ended up with my husband because of that. And it goes on and on and on. My life is a series of synchronicities, and those are your signposts on the road, and you follow those. And you start to trust.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, back to you guys.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I just want to mention that I just received an email from Charles Fontaine in reference to one of the stories I mentioned about the pharmacist, that he walked into the pharmacy and the man seemed to know, said to him, where did it happen, inside or outside? And he answers outside, but then later on, when he got to know the pharmacist and they met again, he finally asked him, how did you know that how did you know that this happened to me? And he looked very puzzled at him and said, I thought you told me.
Wow.
And he said no. And so Charles believes the man was manipulated from, by these beings or by whatever, that he was totally unaware that where this information came from himself. So that's a kind of interesting twist on the story.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah,
well, it's very interesting. I had the one that had experience with me 5 years later. He came to live at our house for a little while. Now, he had been in the military, so you know how they screw with you. And so he had 5 years in the military after, or I don't know how many years he remained in the military after I met him. And so he came.
This is your husband you're talking about?
No, this is a young man, and his name was Vinny. And Dr. Vinny, doing well. But he came back, and we went over the story again, because it was 5 years later.
Yeah.
And then we went over, and he didn't remember everything that we had covered before. It's like they do a brain wipe. They get to him, and they went, oh my God, where did that go? So he had a slightly different variation, and I go, there's my key witness, and now he doesn't frickin' remember. So what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
So they do some stuff to confuse you. And I heard that from a fellow researcher yesterday, that they're taking some of these key people that have written some books, and they're wiping their brains, so they don't talk about the subject anymore, and they go and they write something that's kind of completely different direction. And
the military are doing this, or the aliens?
Don't know. Somebody's doing it. We're suspecting the military because what's their agenda. But I'm going to get some more. I'm going to do some more research on that. But that's frightening too. So it's good that we have these books. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that
I have a potential question. Let me see if this person has a question.
Okay.
And then we'll go back to the story. Hold on one second. Hello, area code 661. Do you have a question, Trish and Rob? You're live.
Yes,
661.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Who's this? Do you have a question for Trish and Rob?
This is Ahura Mazda. This is Ahura Mazda from BC.
Hi, Ahura Mazda.
Yes.
What question do you have for Trish and Rob?
I was listening, and everything happens for the reason. And we, from the UFO community and the paranormal community, we understand exactly what happened to them, and etc. I mean, we believe them. For a psychologist, they will tell, you are, what you're doing is just making everything in your head, so they give you Latuda, and Latuda can kill you, and etc. But myself, I'd like to share something. It happens last 96 hours while I was a slave. I mean, it was around 3 o'clock. I woke up. But once I woke up, I was totally paralyzed. I mean, I could not move my body. I could not move any part of my body. I was just thought I could not even shout to tell to my wife, etc., that, come, or everything was paralyzed totally. So, but I saw some kind of lights. I don't know whether the UFOs was close by, or somehow, because I do communicate with them time to time, and also I can call them to appear in your state or close by. If you tell me your approximately location, I can tell them to come. So I don't know if that has something to do with them, because they know. So it took maybe about 1 hour. I was in paralyzed state.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yes, and
I
don't know
what
was
Let them respond to your question. Go ahead.
Well,
Bob,
my question is, where do you live?
BC, Vancouver.
Oh, Vancouver. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Night paralysis is experience a lot of people have, but I've never heard of it lasting 1 hour.
Me either.
That is a long.
I don't. It's a lasting long time, so I assume it's 1 hour. But at one point, I just said. Slowly, I was able to put, the things, blankets out of me, and I was slowly moving, and I was able to come out of it. So can anybody explain what happened to me, please?
Yeah, well, there's there's a variety of explanations. I mean, the mainstream science would tell you that it's a neurological phenomena that a lot of people have, where other people will tell you that it's a phenomena that's often related to UFO alien experiences. So it's
the retired veterinarian that we were talking about earlier has experienced that also. I don't know that she's experienced it for as long as an hour, though.
Yeah, it's. I think it's. There's a variety of explanations. You have to look closely at your experience to try to, analyze it to see where it was coming from. Have you had any UFO sightings or encounters in the past?
Hold on, I put him on mute. 1 second, let me put him back on.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I have had. Yes. Go ahead.
You have?
Yes, I have had. Yes, I do. I did, yes. Three times so far.
Sightings?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it
sightings,
could be,
yeah.
Yeah, it could be something related to that. And some of these sightings, they're not actually, dramatic encounters, but they're still unusual in that, for example, Trish and I had one just about a month ago. We were in a parking lot outside of a Barnes & Noble in the little town we live in called Wellington, Florida. So we had gone into this, it was just before Christmas, and we'd kind of gone in there look for books for a couple of people, and I happened to see this one UFO book that I had never seen, and I kind of paged through it and looked at the table of contents, showed it to Trish, and says, that looks like a good one, let's get it. So buy it, walk out into the parking lot, and there is this craft of some sort hovering above us, about 300-400
very
feet,
bright,
and very bright light coming out of it. And it's my first thought is, this is like a helicopter who is doing some kind of patrol, but there's no sound at all. and then it starts moving in a circular motion, which in a movement that a helicopter couldn't do. It moves quickly to one side and another side, and it's hovering there. And we watched it for about 10 minutes or so. We're standing there looking up, and there's other people walking by us, and nobody looks up, nobody says anything, and we're wondering, do they not see what is right up, 500-600 feet above us, and moving around? And so finally, Trish, after watching it wasn't a short, it wasn't a 30-second experience.
No.
We were out there maybe 10 minutes watching it, and then Trish says, I have to go into the drugstore over there. So we got in the car and drove around, and it goes to the opposite side of the parking lot. So the building was between us and the parking lot. And so while Trish went inside the drugstore, I'm sitting in the car, and now this thing comes around to the side of the drugstore, and I can see it through the trees over here. So it's like, is there some conscious connection? Yeah.
That's how we felt.
Yeah, we felt like there was some conscious connection between this craft and us. Whether that's just our imagination or whether it's true, that's how it felt for us.
Well, I wanted to address that. I've been seeing UFOs or having visitations since I was a child. So I would say to my friends, "You want to see a UFO?" And so I'd invite them to sleep out. Whenever they were with me sleeping out, and we would have all these sightings. So there might be something about you that can see, like a dog can hear a broader range than a human, right? You might be able to see things that other people can't. And it's like Stephen Greer, when he has his things, out in the desert, everybody comes and they see the UFOs, and they can actually film them. So you could be someone like that,
Yeah. Well,
wow.
In the last year and a half, I've had 4 sightings, and Trisha's had 3. I had one where she wasn't with me. She was in Orlando, and I was just heading for Orlando to meet her and our daughter. And I saw the same thing that we had seen months earlier, which is a series of red lights in the sky that are moving around, and that we had seen these in actually kind of a synchronicity in the town of Jupiter, Florida. We had we just had dinner with a couple friends, and we were coming home, and we started seeing these lights in the sky, and at first I thought it was like, red lights on a radio antenna.
Or maybe a construction site or something like that.
And then we finally reached an opening, and Trish says, turn in. So we turned into this lot, and there are these, 8 or 9 of these bright red lights in the sky, and there's a guy on a Harley. He's pulled in there, and he sees it, and he's all excited, and he's talking to his wife on his cell phone and saying, "Honey, the world is never going to be the same." He's totally blown away. It was funny, and we filmed him. But when you look at the video, it's just little dots in the sky. But when you're watching it, it's pretty impressive, And then they went out; they just blinked out one after another.
Yeah.
Very close together, and
but by the end of it, there had been 4 of us saw the same thing.
Yeah, his wife first showed up, and she was watching too. So
I don't think that these cell phone cameras can pick up a lot of the stuff, and now we've all moved to these cell phone cameras that can't pick up as much as the old cameras that.
Yeah.
And then the cell phone cameras get all the orbs, and everybody thinks it's orbs or something. The jury's still out for me about what orbs are, but you can put a camera out of my front door, and you can get thousands of orbs. Do I have orbs?
Yeah, if there's
could be.
If there's dust in the sky, it can appear as orbs. But I think there are other experiences too that of inside cameras that have taken them inside buildings that that don't have those same atmospheric effects, that there might be something to the orbs. So it's a kind of mixed bag with the orbs. I agree with you there.
Right. Well, you two have been exploring this for quite a while now, and you have all these stories. And what do you think is going on? Let's do like the grand. Yeah. What do you think?
You wouldn't believe how many people we always ask the people we talk to, well, what do you think is going on? And everybody has everybody's got their own take on it.
Yeah, well, there's another layer here we haven't talked about. We just barely touched on, and that's what's the connection with the military and the UFOs and the aliens? Let me tell you a story that we wrote about in Aliens in the Backyard. I think listeners might be interested in this one. This is a woman who used her real name. Her name is Connie J. Cannon, and she was a nurse in St. Augustine, Florida. But she, when this experience happened, she was just moving to St. Augustine from Atlanta.
This was in 1981.
Yeah, November of 1981, and she was her husband and two of their children were in the moving van out in front of her, and she was with her youngest son in a Oldsmobile sedan, and they were driving along on I-75 heading south of Atlanta. They were near Macon, Georgia, when Connie suddenly realized that she was no longer on the interstate, and she was confused. She didn't know where she was. She was sure she hadn't taken an exit, yet she and John, her son, were driving on this strange grid of roads, and there was not a single building in sight, and she didn't see anything that she recognized, and she was suddenly really incredibly tired, but she kept driving. And the next thing she knew, she and John were on their knees outside of the Olds on a black asphalt tarmac near hangars, airplane hangars, and they were sobbing hysterically. And there were several black choppers circling overhead, and there were also three round, softly grumbling spacecrafts in the air, also just above them. And right in front of her and John were a group of Greys and military men who held these massive-looking assault weapons aimed at them. And one of the military men pointed his weapon directly at Connie, leaned into her face, and said, "If you ever," and she doesn't know what he said then, "you will never see your family again." It's like, wow. There was something missing there. It's probably if you ever say anything, you will never see your family again. And her terror was so profound that she could hardly think. But then
suddenly they found themselves back in the car.
Right. Yeah. And so what were these aliens, mingling with military men? What was going on? And suddenly she and John found themselves in their car, and they were and they had no memory of getting back in the car, and they were on the same grid of road. And she finally saw a convenience store and went inside, and the clerk informed her that she was inside Warner Robins Air Force Base. And the only way, she asked how to get off the base, and the only way to get off the base was the same way she got on the base, through the guarded front gate. And she told her she didn't come through any guarded gate. And the clerk said that was impossible. So this is, So eventually she found her way back to I-75. And her husband, by this time, is going crazy, wondering what happened to her. They're behind her, and now they had disappeared. And the husband waited, had pulled over to the side of the road and waited. They never showed up, and he finally drove onto the house. And they arrived like 2 hours later. They should have been right behind her. They're like two hours of missing time there when they had this experience in the Air Force Base. So it's
but when you step back from this story, you have to ask what a convenience store is doing on a military base.
Yeah, they don't have convenience
stores.
They
have commissaries.
Yeah, commissaries, not convenience.
Yeah.
So that's kind of mysterious too. And how she got into this area is very did she really see military people and aliens, or was this some kind of something else? Was it a screen memory? It's very mysterious, and it's just like when people have experiences where they see their have an encounter with aliens and they see a dead person, a relative who is dead, who's passed on, with the aliens, is that really are they mingling with the dead, possibly, or is it somebody that they're pulling the image from your mind of a loved one, and one of the Greys or whoever have shapeshifted into that image supposedly to make you feel more comfortable? That's a possibility.
$1 million question, and Whitley Strieber covered that at work.
Yeah, Whitley thinks it's they're involved in the spirit world, that they travel through the same dimensions as the dead, or not the dead, but there may be more
the
alive.
Afterlife.
The afterlife. They may be more alive than we are. It's
well, alien that was captured. She says that this is a prison planet, and that they have both sides of the continuum, and that we keep recycling and recycling. I mean, I hope it's not true. I don't know if you've ever researched Lawrence Spencer's alien interview information. It's kind of the dark stuff, like David M. Jacobs and like Nigel Kramer from the UK, that the Greys own this matrix, this grid, and that Errol said that they fell into the grid. It already existed, that this is a prison planet, and that some ancient race created it. And they send, this is like the prisoner, all the unwanteds come here from all over the galaxy, and they send them here, and then we just keep recycling. They're trying to help us figure out how to get out of it, because some of their people, they end up getting killed when they set a colony up at, I think it was over in Tibet, right, which is a mysterious place, Tibet. When you talk about the UFO lore, it apparently is connected with a couple, like Omned. Anyway, she said she came there and became a human by going to their school they have there. So there's some connection there. But this is the mystery, because I came in seeing ghosts. Now, were the ghosts extraterrestrials, interdimensionals? What happened that I could see and hear, and they could see and hear me? Ghosts could hear me and see me, and they would come and stand at the foot of my bed. And so, and you wrote some books on ghosts.
Yeah.
So what is going on? That is the big billion-dollar question.
That's the whole question.
That's the whole mystery.
What is going on? It's
and it may not just be one thing that's going on.
That's what I think, and I think Tricia agrees that it's more than one. Narrowing it down to one particular thing, like a prison planet idea, that there may be certain levels of reality where this is a prison planet, but there's also levels of reality where things are going on here that are much more enlightened, and that this is a way to rise to higher levels of existence through our experiences here,
I'll share something that's like correlate. Let me share something that might correlate with your research. This is why I love, we all have pieces of the puzzle, and I love connecting the dots with researchers, because then we're getting a greater insight into what possibly is happening. When I was 4, I was out playing in the yard, picking buttercups for my mother, singing songs to God. I just discovered the concept of God. And next thing, I'm stepping over a little step, and I'm in mid-step, and I'm up on a mothership. And I call it a mothership because it felt warm and loving and, warm fuzzies. I went on a little tour, but they took me to a room which looked like a movie theater. Now, I hadn't been in the movie theater yet at that point, because back in the 50s, you didn't take kids to movie theaters because they were too noisy. So I was in a movie theater type of construct which they created for my convenience, for my human self. But once I was up on ship, I was my eternal self, meaning I had a greater awareness of who I was in the continuum, along with my past lives, incarnations, and my relationship to the beings that were pulling me up there to have this experience. They showed me 24 different multiverses, like a continuum, from the darkest reality, which was the explosion of the planet Earth into a million pieces of stardust, all the way to 24 different variations on the theme, all the way over to a reality, several realities which were utopian in nature. Okay, so dark bottom blew up. Next one, the Earth was whole in one piece, but there was all this destruction. And as they were showing me these pictures on the screen, they were also, I was getting images of when there's destruction. I could see the devastation on the planet, like no life, like the ruins, whatever it was, right? And all the way over to utopia. At the end of the last utopian one, they said, you may choose which reality you want to have as yours. I chose not the greatest utopia, which was kind of everything's done, right? But I wanted something interesting, so I backed it off like 3 from the good end of the continuum. I said, I'll take that one. It gives us enough to do, right? But it's not the dark stuff. And then I was returned. I was returned back to the Earth mid-step, and it was sunset. It had been high noon when I was taken, so I had missing time. But it was very grand and glorious. I always hesitate to talk about it because it sounds almost messianic. But they said you've come to do something which will benefit all humankind. I felt like I had meaning in life and purpose of life, and there was a reason for being here. And then before I turned to go into the house with my buttercups, which I still had in hand, I had the awareness to not tell those people who were my mom, dad, brother, and sister, because they would not understand, even at 4. But then I settled back into my human self, right? So it's like...
Where did they think you were during all that time?
They never said a word. So they were doing something to them that they didn't miss their 4-year-old that was there.
That's very interesting.
So they definitely were given a screen memory or implant or had some other concept of what was going on with their 4-year-old. Like traveling a highway. So imagine a 24-lane highway. You, as the observer participant in this game of existence, can choose which lane you want to be in, and they are all variations on the theme. So I think that we humans, and that's only 24 examples, right, of the realities that we create for ourselves. We're living in a consensus reality, and this is why we're not victims. We can realize and empower ourselves. We are the choosers.
Right. Yeah, I believe that.
These multiverses. So where do you want to go? So these people are having all these horrendous experiences. When you stop playing victim and realize, there's something else going on here, it starts to shift over to your own personal preferences, which I hope you don't want to experience, a Stephen King movie all your life. I hope you want to shift into something more positive.
Something more positive.
Back to you.
Right.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, I think in some ways this is the point that the veterinarian has reached. I mean, in the beginning, her experiences terrified her. And to some extent, she felt that these energies also sort of orchestrated certain events in her life, like her second marriage. You were talking about the synchronicity of meeting your present husband. She had a similar experience. Remember that? When Sandy was talking about how, the being supposedly kept her and her first husband together, and then after she met her present husband, there was a series of synchronicities that allowed them to spend a weekend or something together in Florida. I mean, it was all very complex, and there were a lot of pieces that had to come together
for it to happen. And her experience as a child, because she had a number of unusual experiences growing up, and one of them was she was in the living room by herself and playing. She was about 8 years old and playing that she was on a ship, and she was sitting on the couch, and suddenly she is levitated across the room over to a chair, and she just jumped up really frightened and ran to her room, and she was afraid to tell anybody what had happened to her, because her mother was very much a religious person who saw a lot of evil around her daughter, and it's kind of like the character in Carrie. She had this thing going her entire life until she was actually out of vet school, and she had to actually flee from her family because they were trying to turn her in to get she was mentally ill because of these encounters she was having and these experiences, and she had to actually hide from them for a while. And she was a professional veterinarian at the time, and so the whole family was like all the sons were and one of the daughters were like under the thumb of this ruling mother who seemed to control everyone. It's a very strange story, but that
was my mother too. She was just terrified. She was a very frightened Christian. The Firestone, and afraid of hell, right?
Yeah.
Christian, and she's Presbyterian, but that makes me think that she might have been used in some of the ritual stuff that they do. But I don't want to go there on this show. When you're getting an overreaction from a parent, my mother's dead. I can't ask for anything at this point. It makes me wonder what was going on. What in the world was her woman that she was so terrified?
Yeah.
Wow, we're running out of time here. I this is fascinating, and I know we were talking about having you on another show, and I will contact you on email. But definitely, and I want to create a time when my husband can be here.
That'd be
because
great.
He had to go fix water today, so he's out in the jungle right now, and God bless him. I hope the other people are out there with him. Some people are living very primitively, like we are up here in Maui. But let's just tie in the ghosts a little bit. You wrote a couple stories about synchronicity. It was a second book on synchronicity. What was that about?
Oh, synchronicity and the other side.
And the other side, right. Yeah, we showed a lot of different experiences that people had that were signs basically from the other side, like a person's clock stopping at the time of his or her death. We have a couple of those stories, and that or finding a white feather by a gravestone seemed to be symbolic.
That happens.
To,
that seems to happen a lot.
Right. And
contact through dreams. Contact through dreams.
Oh, the dreams. Yeah, that's something that Dr. Michael Newton and his institute, they talk about. If you want to hear from your relatives, pay attention to your dreams because they are trying to contact you.
And also, if you're in any kind of altered state, I saw both of my parents who were dead during one of Rob's meditation classes. They were in a corner of the room, and my mother, who had Alzheimer's towards the end of her life, my dad, who had Parkinson's. I always wondered, okay, now that they're on the other side, have they, how are they? And my mother looked fantastic. She looked like she did when she was 30 or 40. She was waving at somebody, and then I see my dad coming towards her, and he wasn't in a wheelchair. He was bright, just spry and happy. And then they realized I saw them, and they both just kind of faded away. So, I think in any altered state you can see people who've passed on.
Well, that's very profound. I've had a similar experience, and I don't want to go into it right now. It's a long story. It involves Michael Jackson, who brought my parents and his parents and showed me them, but they were off in the corner of the room. And but my parents waved, but it was like they couldn't come past a certain point. It was like they could only, maybe there's some kind of agreement. What's your insight on that? Did you get any sense of?
But that thing with my parents, I felt. I'd had dreams about my parents since they both passed on, and I kind of followed their progress in the afterlife through these dreams. then so this night in the meditation class, I said I would really like to, have some sort of experience with somebody who's passed on. I didn't specify them, but they were the ones I saw, and it was a very deliberate kind of thing. They were involved in whatever they were involved in on the other side, but as soon as they knew I had seen them and gotten the message, then they just faded away.
Yeah, but there's also experiences where there seems to be contact through actual physical objects. Like, Trish, what was that story about the straight pins?
In college, I lived with a woman whose grandmother had this beautiful house on the Hudson River, and she was a seamstress. Right shortly after she died, we started finding straight pins around our apartment. I thought, what the heck? Neither this woman and I did any sewing. I don't even think I owned a straight pin. So we went to see her mom one weekend, and we took some of the straight pins. We said, look at this. We're getting all these straight pins around the apartment. And my friend's mother said, oh, yeah, Nana's around. And then she pulled out this Bible and showed us a bunch of passages that were underlined with straight pins. Okay.
Oh,
eventually the straight pin thing stopped, but about 15, 20 years later, we're in St. Augustine in an old fort that's you can walk through. There's nothing in this place. It's just really old. I look down, and it's my friend, her mother, and me. I look down, and I find a straight pin. So I picked it up, and I handed it to my friend's mother. I said, can you believe this? And she goes, oh, Nana's around. And I thought, in this old fort in St. Augustine, I mean, it's just the weirdest thing. So, yeah, I mean, there could be physical things like that.
Yeah.
Did you ever tune into Nana and see what she's trying to tell you?
No, I never did because I was really young then. I was like, when it first started happening, I think I was only 20. I was interested in this stuff, but I didn't really know what to do with it.
Yeah, I understand. All right, or in the last couple minutes, let's tie this one up. If you guys will come back, I definitely would like to have
I'd love to.
We'll coordinate that later. But let's do some. How can our people contact you? Your website, all that good stuff.
Okay, our website is www.synchrosecrets.com. And if you put a / in front of that and just put in Synchro Secrets again, that takes you to our blog. Or you could just Google us. Our various websites will come up.
And we have stories almost every day or every other day on our blog. We put up synchronicities, stories, UFO stuff sometimes. And
paranormal stuff.
And we have a lot of information on our books are there as well. And the book, of course, that we've been talking about mostly tonight is Aliens in the Backyard. So that's available as an e-book, as a print book, and as an audio book as well.
And same with the Synchronicity Highway.
Yeah.
Right, and I put all your information up on aquarianradio.com.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So you can click through. You have fascinating library of books. You can fill up a whole library with your books. I've got to get some and start reading through them. I didn't know of you before. You were led to me by something. I sit there at night and I go, okay, universe, who am I supposed to interview next? And things just start showing up in my computer, and I click and I click and I click. And I happened on your interview with Coast to Coast, and I went, these people are great. I got to have at least one show or maybe a dozen. You're
I just want to mention. Thank you.
I
just want to mention one other book. My last book. This is one I did on my own. Trish was working on something else. This is called Bump in the Night, and it came out right around Halloween. It's called Bump in the Night: Ghost Spirits and Alien Encounters. So I kind of combine it all together.
Oh wow! So we'll have to get these books. They're cool. Oh, we got to go. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenna. It was great.
We'll talk soon.
Okay, take care.
Take
Bye
care.
now.
Aloha. Bye-bye.